Welcome to Director Services Select Committee meeting for Thursday, April 18th. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the Coast Salish territory, traditional territory. First, I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda. We have it moved second. All in favor? Motion's carried. And, oh, am I doing your job, Mr. Barry? Sorry.
You're doing it well.
Do we have adoption of the minutes?
Adoption of the minutes, Madam Chair. Director Services Select Committee meeting minutes of March 21st.
Do I have a motion? It's moved and second. All in favor? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes?
No business arising from the minutes.
And now we move on to public input period.
There's no public in attendance.
We're not a very popular committee, are we?
Nobody's figured out how exciting it is yet. Any delegations? Any delegations, Mr. Barry?
You've made up your mind already?
No delegations, no correspondence. And the first item would be a report from the Human Resources Division regarding a draft code of conduct.
Thank you. Ms. Mohan.
Through the chair and to the committee, I think that the report is fairly self-explanatory. I took some direction from our last few meetings and the examples that I had provided previously and put together a combination of elements that through meeting conversation had been discussed as preferred. And so I have a draft before you. It is just a draft, and I would expect you would have, places where you might want to wordsmith it or add or delete items. And I guess the only other thing I'm noticing in my report that I made reference to was that I would have information before you today around what might be legally available for sanctions on elected officials versus what would be more informal sanctions. And I actually, truthfully, have not had time to investigate that. So I don't have that information for you today, but certainly can bring it to a future meeting. I don't believe the sanctions that are mentioned are contrary to any legal restrictions, on sanction of election officials.
Do we have any questions from committee? Director Nicholson.
I'd just like to say that I thought Ms. Mohan did a great job.
Director, oh, sorry.
One thing I was wondering was about the use of social media. And we had some discussion yesterday about how we use media and perhaps having a little disclaimer or that's the wrong word, more a explanatory thing at the beginning of meetings so people in the public understood that we were paperless and we used our whatever you call these things, these tools. So this use of social media was very focused on just how we use it in general. So I'm wondering if we needed to add anything here, if this was an appropriate place to add it or not.
Like add use of electronics or description.
I think she means just saying that we don't.
Well, my meeting's getting out of control already. Director Marsh.
Sorry, are you recognizing me?
Yes, if you're on this on the same time. Well, Director
think
Stone I put you in line, but is it to this topic? Yeah, I'll come up with it. Okay. Director Marsh.
He's pouting. I can't remember now. Go ahead, Director Stone. No, I do remember. I think what Director Nicholson was talking about was that some people have the impression that when we're doing something on here, we're actually doing something personal when some of us take notes here. And so I'm not sure that it needs to be in the Code of Conduct, which is more an internal document, I assume. But I think the suggestion yesterday was that the chairs at the beginning of a meeting explain that we're paperless. And so, but I don't know if we made a decision on that yesterday because we couldn't really.
Well, maybe we could just put that aside for a second and maybe get a comment if it should be in our procedures bylaw or not, but we'll go to Director Stone.
Actually, I did have a note here that we could say, like, in our policy, could just say that we refrain from using social media during our meetings. You know, it's a good reminder. There was just a couple of things that I had that I thought just could be cleaned up a little bit. I only know this because I look in my own wordiness sometimes. Under, on the first page, under the first set of bullet points, the last one says, being sensitive to others' emotions when they are feeling very passionate about an issue. I thought we could just simplify it. I think using the word emotions kind of has a certain connotation, and just saying being sensitive to others when they are feeling passionate about an issue is basically just, when they are passionate about an issue. So it just takes some of the descriptive words out. It just says being sensitive to others when they are passionate about an issue, instead of emotions and feeling very. I just think it makes it more policy, less frou-frou-y. That's just my perspective. Frou-frou-y, you know, fluffy, less fluffy, more direct. That's, you know, those were the only things that when I read through it. The other one was on the second page, under the first set of bullets. Avoid repetition or restating what was just said. Just a wording thing I thought it would read better if it said avoid repetition or restating what has already been said. Just was just seems like a little bit informal language from my perspective. And the last one is under the last bullet of using social media. It says refrain criticizing staff or calling their professional capabilities into question. And all the other parts are good, but it doesn't say anything about criticizing board or board policy on social media, because once the decision is made by the board, it is owned by the board. And if we look at our early policies about communicating with the public, it does refer to not criticizing board decisions, that once it's a board decision, it is owned by the whole board. So I just thought we could add something there that said something like refrain from criticizing staff, other members of the board, refrain from criticizing board policy, other members of the board or staff, or calling their professional capabilities into question. Or we could use it as a separate bullet item, but I think that that's key, that people don't use social media as, you know, their board members and board policy as fodder for their social media. And I think that was all I had. And I would echo the earlier comments. This is awesome. I might just change some titles on here and borrow it if that's okay.
Director Marsh?
To the last point, I think if to add that about other directors should be a separate bullet point. I think it's important, especially if we ever have to do any kind of, God forbid, what's the C word that you were just talking about? Censure. I see the word and I don't know why it doesn't have a hard C. So that's why yeah. If we ever have to do censure, I just think it's really clear that way. And I think I'd rather see, in terms of on social media, recognizing the duty to support the overall board's decision on social media as part of education or something, like just something a little more positive than refraining. Does that feel okay to you, Erin?
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, talking about the social media part, was there also, I know yesterday we spoke to media like the newspapers, comments in newspapers. So did we just stick to, it's in here as well? Because we talk about social media, but we're not really talking about the media in general, which is very little of it, but newspaper.
So it could be social media/media?
Yeah, because that's what that's what I heard
That's a good
yesterday.
point. Was that Director Stone?
Just a typo. It says social medial platforms. Under use of social media, it says in elected officials, we recognize the value of social medial. Hopefully not remedial, but social media, and you could say and media platforms for public engagement, if we were going to include media in there. That's just,
Director Morrison?
Thanks, bear with me. I don't know whether through you to Ms. Mohan, but I seem to recall reading this, and it was a few days ago, there was something about preparation for meetings and that sort of thing, and I'm looking over it and I can't seem to track it down where it is. Anybody else see it?
it is in here because I just read it.
Okay. Well, I just want to bring this up because I understand that other than electoral area services, we might be seeing some changes to the level of staff presentations at committee, and that I think that's going to enhance the need for directors to have read their material and come prepared. So I wanted to make that note. And there's another, and I don't know whether this falls under social media or what we commit to doing, but this is because of a little bit of feedback that I'm hearing about when we're, there you go, thank you, it's in that section. Is when we're here and when we're engaged, that we're here and engaged in the business of the committee that we're attending or the board that we're attending. And I bring this up, and I think that I think it was Director Staples had brought up the idea that she is it's important for her to be able to maintain contact with family and the likes, and that the challenges around that, and absolutely respect that. That's important. I know that all the time that my daughter was growing up, I always had this at hand, but in the certain circumstances in the last board, and I'm hearing a little bit of feedback from people that are front row of the gallery and exposed to the directors at this end of the table, that it's been noted that iPads or services not open to our agenda, but open to email programs and the like. So I don't know how we might be able to encourage the members around the board to able to be engaged in the activity that we're all engaged in, and not to be we've talked about when people take calls to step out of the room and the likes, and if there's something that's that important that people need to disengage from the committee work or the board work that we're doing, is there a way that we can encourage that? It may not have to be in the code of conduct, may just have to be some discussion in a meeting at some point.
Ms. Mohan had a comment, maybe I can go to her, thank you.
I just, from the direction that I took from the group around creating this code of conduct, my sense was that you wanted something sort of brief and principles-based as opposed to specific about things like, do not have your cell phone open or your, so, but hearing that, I am looking at that list of bullets about demonstrating respect, and it doesn't really address the issue that Director Morrison is talking about, which is staying engaged with the meeting while it's happening, something to that effect, which would then be a catch-all for things like, it will allow you, I guess, a basis for a conversation with someone to say, this bullet says you should stay engaged in the meeting, and it's been noticed that you're doing these other things during the meeting, whatever they may be. So I would suggest that if you want to go down that road, that you choose a bullet point that has a bit of general application to it to be consistent with the rest of the document.
Director Marsh, and then I'll have a comment.
Okay, yeah, just on that, I used to think in my first term at North Cowichan that I could get more information than I'd had time to research at home, even though I'd read the package, and still follow the conversation. And I learned that actually I missed quite a bit. And I'm wondering if maybe if we're going to have a less formal discussion about this as a group, some of us just share what we've learned over time, because I'd go, all of a sudden I'd realize, oh, I was so engaged in this that I didn't hear what that person said. And then so I now, if I need to look something up, I do it before I come here, which makes for later nights, but I feel a little more present. And so I don't know Because I used to think that that was doing my duty, right? They said that, I want to check if that's, but it really wasn't helpful.
Thank you, thank you. I would just like to make a comment of what I feel is we have to be a little cautious of how much we're gonna dictate how people are gonna behave and what they're gonna do. If this becomes a really lengthy document, it's hard to own it. So if it has more generalization of, like the sentence of being engaged in the meeting, that definition could encompass a whole bunch of items. It could mean not looking it up online, and it could mean not doing other, like ordering your dry cleaning or whatever it is, making your shopping list. So, right, and personally, I would like to look at this document and see what we could take out instead of add. It seems quite lengthy. I feel like it would be hard for 15 people to own it and say, yes, this is how I want to be portrayed and behave. But that's my comment. And next I have Director Stone and then Director Yanni DiNardo.
Well, now you sent me off on another tangent. Well, the challenge is, and I'll give examples, is and this isn't, I joked about, seeing what's up at Home Depot, because it's on my way home, but that happened once, so I own that, but the reality is that I also find that sometimes statements are made during meetings that I want to sort of fact check. It gives me a pause for thought, and I will quickly Google something and then pull it up, and it is a tough balance, but I don't think we can be so prescriptive as to remove that opportunity, because there's two ways it can go. Either I'm going to dispute something that may be factual based on my desire to be able to confirm something or check a source, and that I don't think that's productive, or be able to check a source that might say, okay, well, based on this report that I've read before and I just confirmed here, that isn't the case, right? I look up our OCP and stuff during meetings all the time, so I'd hate to be too prescriptive or descriptive in what those specifics are, but I think that the higher level thing is, make sure you stay engaged in the meeting when you're using technology, ensure that it's for purposes of the item that's on the agenda or something like that. I don't know how we word it. On the other thing though, and I appreciate that, Sierra, but I did kind of go through here, and at first I was like, oh, wait a minute, some of this is covered by this under sort of the conduct with the public, for example, relates a lot to, say, social media, but they are different things, and I think they do need to be separated. I actually thought it took me only a few minutes to read through this. I'm not the fastest reader in the world. I think that there's a level of detail here that's probably needed, because you get too general, and somebody could say, well, that's not how I interpret it, right? So I think some specificity is needed in certain areas, especially around, well, I guess it's all how we treat people. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with making it much shorter. I know from listening to myself talk and my own writing, though, and Twitter is great for this, because I'll copy a post from another social media platform into Twitter and try and make it fit into 240 characters. And then I find, wow, that was a way more concise to say the rambling thing that I said on Facebook. So I think somebody could go through this and go, okay, from an editing standpoint, how do we condense it? But I wouldn't want to lose the spirit and intent of most of the stuff that's said in there.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to agree with you as well. I trying to recall the ABICC Code of Conduct, which, thank you. That's the one I thought was, but anyway, I'm here to sort of listen and remain open, but I tend to think that the shorter is better. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's
Oops,
actually.
that was all, I didn't have my mic on.
Madam Chair, that's actually spelled out, the last paragraph on the third page. Censure, removal from committee membership, prohibition from representing the district at events or attending conferences or seminars, reduction in compensation, recommendation that an apology be given, counseling, coaching, or training, and recommendations deemed appropriate by the third-party investigator. So there's a number of options available if someone didn't follow this.
Director Marsh.
So I hear what some people are saying about length, and compared to North Cowichan's, this is like the Cole's Notes. And I think it actually, I really acknowledge the brevity in the bullet points, but they're very comprehensive. And I think we need that, because otherwise the nuance thing where people argue, well, what is, I can't even think of a particular one, but sometimes when people are feeling like this anyway, they're just gonna, when asked, they're gonna get more like that, right? So I think this spells it out quite clearly. I'm not sure it needs to be mentioned in here, but we had some coaching by somebody at North Cowichan that if we're gonna have social media pages that are just for our elected, you know, like a web page, or we need to, it's wise to put on there always at the front page or at the head of your Facebook page, these are the opinions expressed here are of me as an individual, and they don't represent that of the North Cowichan or of the CVRD board, or don't necessarily. And then when you can, and it's clear if you're posting stuff here, about here, like if I'm posting press releases or something, I just forward them and it shows they're from CVRD or from North Cowichan, but that might be something, it doesn't, I don't think it has to be in here. But when we present whatever we want the board to consider for adoption, maybe that could be part of the discussion. Just so that, because one of the things that's my biggest irk is when someone who holds office or used to hold office, and we know a few people who used to, who say untrue things because people believe them because of their former position or their position. So, I don't know.
Ms. Mohan, and then Director Morrison, Chair Morrison.
I'm not sure if I missed the sort of nut of what you were trying to say, but there is some reference in here to, when speaking for themselves as individual board or committee members, to include, in my opinion, or similar disclaimer.
Right. Then that would be if you're typing something, but we have a static thing as well.
Okay, so this is sort of more general. This is just sort of generally on social media. If you're going to express your own opinion, make sure there's a disclaimer somewhere. So it's broad, but it does refer to a social media presence.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we put it in here, but just
Oh,
when
okay.
we're talking about what
Okay.
the social media piece, that, so if I weigh in on something from Councillor Kate Marsh, Councillor, I don't always remember to say, this is my opinion. But if they go back to that fact, that if they click on my name and go back to my page, it's there, always, so that I can't, do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I'm not making sense. You don't like it, Sarah, but.
Can I comment on that? Do we sign, there's nothing that we sign as a role of a director that says essentially you're a counselor all the time, no matter what, even if you're not acting as a counselor. The public sees you as a counselor. So to say, oh, this is just my opinion, and I think is kind of false. Yeah, like, so, but I'm wondering, do we sign, I just don't remember if we sign, or if there's part of our inauguration where it's, you
Madam-
kind of claim that you are always a director.
Madam Chair, you take an oath that that you're serving as the director. That's in effect 24/7.
So are you just thinking it's, because we were advised that by a lawyer.
Director Marsh. So you were advised to
By
have
our-
that. So I'm just wondering if there almost should be part of our it's not really your conduct, but just a reminder of, you are always a director. So but what you're saying is you're not.
I don't think I
When you
was
have a
saying
disclaimer
that.
that says, I'm acting as just Kate Marsh here. I mean, you're not doing city business, but essentially,
It's when you're commenting on an opinion that either hasn't been debated at the board or yet, like, for instance, when the housing stuff was coming up, I was on social media a lot. And the board hadn't decided the ultimate, what we were going
Right,
to do, but we were
right.
doing. So, and I'm just sharing that our lawyer, when we met, said that we should have that disclaimer. And I just assumed the lawyer knew what they were talking about, so I did it. But I agree with you. I know very well I can't go to the grocery store without, that's why I dance like a fool at AVICC, because it's only my colleagues who are going to know.
no one's watching. It's, I have Director Sanhu. Was there anybody else who had their hand up? Sorry. And then Chair Morrison.
Well, just speaking about, recently, like, our new council had looked at a facility. There was talk there, we wanted to maybe buy a building. And then the community took over the story. And I never comment on stuff on council stuff, but I clearly stated after we made our decision, we weren't buying this building. And it just went full force on social media, on town happenings, on all these different crazy sites. And I put what happened the night of our meeting, and I got booted from that group. And I thought, yay, because I had never commented. But my point is that no matter what we tell people what the truth is, what we know of the truth decisions we make, people make their own stories up. And I know that I can't correct anybody at my table in Lake Cowichan. I speak for myself. I have whatever they say and do, that's on them. I can't control that. But my point is just social media can take over and it just explodes. And we do need to have some definitions that give under our rules of our jobs of 24/7, right? So.
Chair Morrison. Anybody else?
So I'm going to go back out of this particular point of discussion, and you know, I'm quite comfortable with some of the specificity in here, and that it referenced the AVICC Code of Conduct, and that's, you know, specifically for an event for 4 days, and that was a bit of a reaction to the somewhat more lengthy one that UBCM had made part of their package. And but looking at this is a lot about, you know, behavior, respect, conducting ourselves, and I can be comfortable in if the committee decided to put this through to the board and ask them what they think, recommend that we move forward with a policy such as this. And I think I also I agree with simplicity and brevity to a certain extent, and I don't know if these headings are exactly the right wordings that we might have for headings, but I could see us having like a 5-pointer where we have a CVRD code of conduct for elected officials, and that we've got standards of conduct for working with each other, standard of conduct for interacting with the public, standards of conduct for working with CVRD staff, use of social media and complaints, and it's a 5-pointer. And for specifics or further details, refer to the main policy. And there you've got simple, clean, we have a code of conduct, these are the headings. For the detail, you go into the body of the document. And I think we can, you know, satisfy both needs.
Thank you, Chair Morrison. Director Stone.
Yeah, on the brevity thing, I couldn't find the AVICC Code of Conduct, but I did find the UBCM one. It's like 7 pages long. It's a little overly verbose. I still think that this might be good. I kind of set out a term there, the weasel clause on people's social media. That's considered sort of, I guess, worst practice. The problem with the weasel clause is it gives permission to defy the code of conduct on social media. Well, it's just my opinion. Now, what Director Sandu was talking about was saying you were actually representing the realities of a decision of council or your board. That's different. You are supporting the board's position. You're just explaining it from your perspective. That's very different than going against it and under this clause of this is my personal viewpoint, my personal page, right? When we become elected officials and a board decision is made, we're all representatives of that decision. The best thing I've done is just been 2 occasions where I didn't agree with the decision of my council, and I just said, I don't have any comment. Personally, this is why council made the decision. This is what I got from the discussion, right? And end of quote or comment or, but I think that anything that's interpreting through your own eyes, a decision of the board, while supporting the decision, this is why I think the board made this decision, is fair comment. I think that should be protected as their fair comment. I just have seen in my own shortish experience in this job, people use that kind of a weasel clause as this is my voice, or write letters to the editor that go against the decisions that have been made. And I think that that's frankly kind of toxic, right? So I don't think that should be fair comment, but.
Director Nicholson?
Whenever we're ready, I'd love to move this to go to the board with the minor edits that we've discussed today.
Is that a motion? Second? All in favor? Any discussion? No. Ms. Mohan?
Sorry, just because I'm taking notes on the minor edits and then want to make sure that I've got my direction clear. I think most of it is clear. I just want to summarize that the rewording that Director Stone provided about being sensitive to others when they're passionate about an issue, avoiding repetition or restating what was already said, just for some brevity. And then under the social media area, creating a bullet that talks specifically about board policy and other board members with respect to comments. And then there was this sort of general conversation about it's not just social media, and I wondered if the board, or if this group wanted to consider changing the heading and the references just to use of media and make reference to, there's multiple forms, because there's radio,
Including
there's
social
newspaper,
media.
including social media?
And then letters to the editor, that sort of thing would all be covered.
Covered under that. So we'll change it to use of media, and then I will reference social media just because it's kind of a hot button issue right now, so.
We may just say examples include social media, letters to the editor,
Okay.
comments and stories.
Okay, and so, and then there was some discussion, but no real consensus about including something around using technology at meetings to do the business versus staying engaged. Do you want me to put a general comment about being engaged in the meeting, but refrain from talking about the specifics of technology? Would that be fair to say? Yeah? Okay.
Would that be under the demonstrating respect
Yes,
group?
yeah. I might even be able to just throw in 1 or 2 words into one of those existing bullets that talks about staying engaged, and that would be it, so, okay. Okay, I think I'm clear on how to put it together then.
And that last section of that paragraph could be tightened up. There's a bit awkward wording.
Sorry, can you tell me exactly?
Director Nicholson?
I can't edit.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Yeah.
Director Nicholson?
I could provide you with some edits if you'd like, but I just thought the last complaints and disciplinary action, depending on the severity of the complaint,
I know it's confusing.
those 2 sentences don't read very
It's
well. They're a little bit
confusing.
awkward.
Okay.
And there's it needs to be and independent. That always drives me nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I did it really fast, and so there's a
Yeah,
bunch of typos.
I know you did, but I think that if you went back over it, you'd figured that one out.
Okay, feel free to send me an editing suggestion, and then you'll have a chance to review it before it actually goes to the board, so.
And so can I just ask a question of Mr. Berry? Does this essentially become like a legal document that we would sign and? No, just a
Madam Chair,
guide-
this would be a policy, if approved by the board, it'd be a policy, and you agree to abide by it. It's a board policy, so there's nothing for you to sign. It's just like any of the other policies the board passes.
Director Stone?
What I actually thought was really impressive, though, when it was just an extra couple words in the North Cowichan's oath of office, I think it might be something we could look at for the next term, where we, of all the things we agree to abide by the code of conduct. And I think adding it to our oath of office would at least create some accountability. I know you don't want to have to re-oath us again, but anyway, just I think maybe implement that for the.
Re-oath. Is that a word?
Mr. Keeber's
On to, oh,
out of order,
Mr. Barry.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Barry, do you have a comment for that?
I was just going to say that could be a suggestion for the 2022 swearing in of the new officials.
And new boards always love it when you bring new things forward, so we'll make sure we do that. Moving on to R2, Mr. Barry?
R2 would be a report also from the Human Resources Division regarding compensation considerations.
Ms. Mohan?
Through the chair to the committee, I've provided a report with you with sort of a laundry list of compensation factors, just to let you know that it is a big practice, compensation, and it encompasses a lot of considerations. I want to make it clear that some of the considerations that are listed here are ones that are typically used for employment relationships and not for elected officials. But because some of the discussion sort of has in the past waded into areas comparing the role and the duties of elected officials to similar staff kinds of positions, I thought it might be useful for you to know that that's how compensation decisions are made for employee roles. And so really, I provide you this report with an aim to talking about process, as in which of these kinds of factors do you plan on incorporating when making a decision about compensation for elected officials, how it should be decided. So it's really to give you background to make compensation philosophy or compensation policy decisions, not specific compensation decisions. So, and I'd be happy to discuss any of them. It was an interesting research process. I was surprised to find some things. The City of Calgary recently used the same consultant that many local governments use in Western Canada especially to look at their compensation philosophy, and they had chosen a target that had for which one of the factors was the average weekly wage of a Calgarian, basically. And because of that, and because of an economic recession that they recently experienced, or slowdown, the mayor's salary was actually reduced, which was an interesting turn of events, which is not, doesn't have a whole lot of precedence. So, but it did raise the issue of the fact that when you tie salary to one or the other indicator, it's a double-sided coin. And so if that indicator goes down, the expectation is that the salary goes down. So just keep that in mind. I think it's outlined in the report that is a risk. And that it turns out that average weekly salary of a citizen is not an uncommon factor used in local governments throughout North America, and a little bit in Europe as well. So anyhow, there wasn't time for an exhaustive search, but those were some surprising things to me that I hadn't encountered before. Both the fact that the consultant that we currently use is widely used for that purpose, for compensation philosophy, and this average weekly earnings factor, which hasn't entered into our discussion up until now. So, and with that, I'll leave you with the factors that you can discuss yourself.
I have Director Stone.
Do we know what the average weekly earnings is in the CVRD? I'd be out of curiosity. I know, I was thinking I'd look on my device to see what it might be, but.
Through the chair, I don't have that information, but I don't know that it's available in as granular a fashion as the Cowichan Valley. I think you certainly would be able to get it for Victoria, and whether that's a good comparator or not is up for debate. So, and so yeah, certainly we'd have to do some research if we were going to use that indicator to find a source of that statistic. So.
Well, a general comment, I would say, not specifically to, average weekly salary or anything, but I think the challenge is that there is a recognition broadly. We just went to the AVICC conference. I think that the amount of work that elected officials do in terms of time invested is growing all the time, and quite significantly, it seems. I'm talking to people that have been around for a decade or more. They have said in the last decade, the amount of work that you have to put in, the kinds of reports that you need to digest, the kind of facts you need to understand, the policy pieces are all much heavier lifting than they were, you know, just a decade or not much more before. The other thing is the public scrutiny has gotten that much more. The impacts on family, the impacts of social media, and our inability to, as public citizens, have the protections that a private citizen might in terms of fair comment and criticism that can make it really hard. I think it's very difficult to not look at compensation subjectively. And I think those comparisons are really difficult when you start doing averages and stuff. And most of us sort of fall back on that. And then we kind of keep on going around this circle of chasing the new average as everybody compensates themselves, right? To deal with external factors and so on. And then it comes to the piece of accessibility. You know, for me, at every level of local government, large or small, I would love to be able to know that my elected officials could afford to, if they desired, invest full-time in representing our community and helping move the objectives forward. And I know a lot of people at this table do, on our board table, do that, and there are others that don't. So it's difficult to make a blanket comparison. But I think it's important, with the complexity of the issues we're dealing with, continual demand from our communities to better regulate and protect them as citizens, to invest in things that are non-traditional for local government, and really being the most connected to the people, that we have a really thoughtful discussion, and this, I know, will take some time, on how we do that and how we talk to the community about it, and see if that people understand that their expectation should be that you don't just get somebody who can afford to do it, whether through retirement or wealth or other things, and that you really make sure that the people that represent you are representative of your community and that they're compensated well for it. There's people that I know around this table and other local government tables that don't make a living wage based on the amount of time that they put in. And I'm not saying that this isn't public service, but we're the only level of government where the public servants aren't paid to serve the public. We're expected to do it out of a sense of duty or service to the community. Nobody criticizes other levels of government for being quite well remunerated. So I think that somebody at some point is going to have to take some bold action on what is really fair compensation for the amount of work and the expectations that those people are good at that work. So that's my little rant.
Thank you, Chair Morrison, and then I'll insert myself and then direct.
So I'm not sure how particularly helpful my comments will be, but I just want to note a couple of things that something that stuck with me that Chair Acton said in last term when she turned around and asked Mr. Kieber what the entry-level clerk person, unionized full-time, was would earn in this organization, and I think it was in the range of $45,000. How that stuck with me, because that's 50% more than what a director makes here, and there is a certain absurdity to that level of compensation for elected officials. One thing that I'm gonna just make a couple of remarks about is I've been here long enough to see where other organizations have gone in an attempt to tackle this, and so I think we're lucky because we can benefit from good, bad examples of other areas that have gone into this. I remember a number of years ago, the town of Lake Cowichan went to a 3-person committee to review the compensation for the mayor and councilors. And I think they came back with, you know, we recommend 0 increases, and I think they gave they gave the mayor $100 a month more and a small amount to the councilors. Didn't work. There's been a number of examples, and some of these we've done that circular comparison hamster wheel thing in the past, and I don't think that's worked. I do know that I've seen a couple of examples where we did our surveys of directors' activities in relation to their work at the regional district. Now, this would be going back 6 or 8 years, I think, when we had an average for electoral area directors of 44 hours a week. So, and there's quite a swing. There's some directors don't put in much time and some put in lots. So that actually triggered, I think, something like a bold $5,000 increase in compensation. I think we went from $24,000 to $29,000. And that was an interesting exercise. But one thing that's remained constant throughout this is the misperception of the community. The community thinks we're all relatively well compensated. And gold-plated pensions, I remember when I was running for office, the Sophie report came out, and the number of people over $75,000 had been published, and I was knocking on a door, and someone said, "Oh, I know why you're running for office. I saw what you guys get paid in the paper." And it was the Sophie report for 75 grand plus. I think at that point, the compensation was just over $22,000 a year. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think using a standard process that's listed in here or a standardized approach is, I'm not sure that's going to necessarily meet the needs of what we need to do. I think we may need to, take a couple of chances, do a little bit of research. I don't know what the capability of and capacity of staff would be to perhaps do a survey of activity for directors, but I think that addressing this, and I would put it forward that there be a look at what the chair is compensated and whether or not there's an opening for vice chair addition to for the vice chair to be compensated as well. I think those are areas that might need to be looked at as well. Thanks.
I do have some comments and I'll save them, but I just wanted to share this document that I brought with me. I'm sorry it didn't make it on the agenda on time, but I brought the front page of the Focus newspaper in Shawnigan. It's from 2014, right before the 2014 election, and I brought it because I've had a couple municipal directors say, well, what does an area director do? And so when I came into this position, I used the front page of the newspaper to follow along, make sure I was doing everything that was expected of me. But I think it can outline a little bit of some of the duties that we do participate in that you may not be aware of when you're at this table. And our community does expect us to do it, so I'll just pass these along. Keep one. And I'll put myself on the list for later, and I have Director Marsh.
So I did do the Google search, and Social Planning Cowichan, it's difficult to, they've got a lot of different charts, but what they're saying Cowichan families are making, the median family income after tax, so that's, I imagine, 2 people and a couple of children is what they're measuring, 70,561,000. So that's the median. What do they need to be making? 66,245 is the yearly living wage for 2 adults and 2 children. Which begs the question of, there are many single people, and certainly they don't have as much expense in some ways, but they do. It's not exactly cut by 25%. Like living alone in my house, I don't pay 25% to live there, less than people with 4 people. And I don't know how you measure all that kind of stuff, but if you started to look at what's happening in our economy, we have 47.3% of people in the Cowichan Valley make less than 30,000. So now, I think they might be talking about individuals. I'm not sure. We could check that with Michelle because they did these stats, but it's in the same chart as the median family. So I found that a bit confusing. It's hard to read, but I think it would bear doing a bit of research. They're pretty up to date. I think I just want to say, even though you may all agree and nobody out there's going to hear it in the province, but I think it's a drag that we have to talk about what we should be compensated about when we're told we're creatures of the province. And so, I mean, I don't know. It just feels kind of ucky to be talking about it. But so I just wanted to say that. Yeah, that's all I want to say right now, I think.
Thank you. I'll insert myself. I don't see anyone else with their hand up. Oh, sorry, Director Stone after me. Don't think I've been shy on the compensation part. I strongly believe this position should be at least 75, and I'm $75,000 a year, and I say should, because the quality of person that you want to attract is high. There's a high skill set that I've met some really great people in my community who would be awesome at this position. But to expect them to leave their succession in their career for $30,000 a year, it is not possible, whether they're single or, and when you look at medium, you're looking at mediocre. To me, we want to attract really great people who have a lot of skills. And how do you do that? Well, no, we're privileged. You have to be privileged to be here as an area director. My earning potential is many times over this. That might sound arrogant, but is this on? Yes. So it is a little arrogant, but I want to do this for my community, but I can only do this because I can afford to. And so that's, like Director Stone mentioned, it's only a small number of people. You're either semi-retired or you have a spouse to lean on or other income. So you're not necessarily attracting the best candidate. And I believe this, even the CVRD as an organization looks at, well, how do we attract people here? We attract them by living in a great place, offering a great work environment, and actually being compensated to the fullest. So I'll move to, we have Director Stone and then Director Nicholson.
Just using my device again to look stuff up. You know, just for reference, municipality that would have a similar size of population averages about 110,000 for the mayor and about $43,000 a year for a councillor. And arguably, many of these would have 8 councillors, sort of similar to the area director numbers we have here. And arguably, based on they have more support because they're all general councillors for a region, and they can work and support each other, and the expectation isn't on them to be looking after a specific area with specific issues. Regional district numbers based on a late 2018 analysis, because a lot of people were making adjustments for the 2019 tax year, had electoral area directors across the province around 45,000, municipal directors over 20,000, and an additional 30,000 for the average chair. So looking at averages, I think that we're still, you know, maybe in the ballpark, but nowhere near the fences. Looking at how municipal directors and mayors are compensated, arguably with more resources at their disposal, there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I will reinforce Chair Acton's comments about what people expect to get and the level of talent they should expect from somebody who's going to run for local office, take a break from their career. If you look at provincial government, have you ever looked at the sitting schedule? Or a federal government, look at the sitting schedule. They have like a 40-year union employee kind of schedules with all the days off and breaks and so on. And sure, they're in their constituency, absolutely. But I would argue that local government is especially in electoral areas, is as high a level of commitment. You're closer to the people. You get stopped a lot more in the grocery store, the corner store, walking down the street. I think the impacts on your life could be just as great or greater than senior levels of government. And then when you've served your 4 years, you get a 15 to 2-month to 18-month transition severance package that's worth another year plus of worth of salary again, so that you can at senior government, so that you can reestablish your career again and have a bit of a cushion, nice, fluffy, soft down cushion to land on. All natural, of course. So I'm being a little bit glib, but the reality is that the expectations on local government, the impacts on people's lives, in my opinion, are much greater than the average MLA or member of parliament even. It's hard on the West Coast because of the travel, but I just think we need to be thoughtful, and maybe this is something we need to take to local government associations or something, because it is really difficult to be the first to do what I believe is right. But at some point, our compensation needs to reflect the workload, the talent level that you should expect as a local person when you elect a local government person, and the sacrifices somebody makes to be in local government. I think we can all agree that we could be all making significantly more money doing something else. You know, I think Director Acton, we haven't got into what our careers were like, but I could make more consulting and probably work 2 full days a week. I could make more than double what I make combining my municipal and regional district compensation. And it's difficult to do that, because if you really do care as much as the people around this table do, and at all local governments, you put in that time. You can't stop yourself, because you know that if you got a little bit more time, because, you know, and this report is accurate, after 4 years, I got a lot better at my time management and knowing issues and being ready to go at the table. But that doesn't mean that I go home and have a nice afternoon off. It means that I take a nap and then dive into a new project. And there's always more projects than I can handle balls in the air and ones waiting to take on, and I just can't wait to get to those things. So I think if people want more people like us to make that investment and then expect the good kind of results that they get, compensation is definitely fair game as far as the discussion goes.
I'll insert Ms. Mohan here. Thank you.
I'm going to shut up now.
I just want to make a couple of comments. I just want to echo that what Director Stone has said about nobody wanting to wade in on this. Like, it's very difficult to get information from any kind of research body or on what should be the factors that figure into elected official and compensation. And regions that have done it have been totally attacked in the press and by the public and have reversed some of their decisions, or they've really bore the brunt of criticism. So I agree, it's icky. It's not, nobody wants to say how it should be done. So I just wanted to let you know I'm aware of that. Director Stone brought up some examples of municipal compensation, and I just want to tell you from my experience working in a municipality that one of the bases of compensation that is determined is whether a mayor is full-time or part-time, and whether councillors are full-time or part-time. And so sometimes there's a big discrepancy because the mayor is full-time and the councillors are part-time. We don't have those kinds of definitions about the roles for CVRD elected officials. So just to be careful when you're trying to compare, that's often what's happened, is that a municipality has said the mayor is a full-time job, therefore this is the salary, and you know, councillors or aldermen or whatever it might be designated part-time and therefore a different salary level. So the other thing is that I took it for granted in the fact that this committee was established, that there was a desire to look at how the elected officials are compensated, because there was some level of dissatisfaction with currently either how they're compensated or how compensation is determined. But I would put to you that the committee has a limited scope, right? I think we're here till June is generally what the idea was. And that it would be really great to spend time, because even if you're all in agreement that yes, the compensation is too low, we have to figure out a way to more accurately reflect the effort and or skill or dedication or whatever the factor may be. It's low, we want to see it increase, but you're going to have to choose a way of doing it. You're going to have to decide how will you determine that new number. And so rather than spend time at this table talking about the justifications for doing that, I think the time would be best spent trying to come up with the formula or the method or which comparators, or are we going to use a public committee, or are we going to use a consultant? Because I think the very fact you have this committee has already settled the question of there's an interest potentially in revising what the compensation is. I haven't heard very many people at the table say, I don't want to touch this. This is either not appropriate, or it's politically maybe too sensitive, and so I don't want to touch this. So the fact that we're here touching it suggests to me that we should focus efforts on the method.
I have Director Nicholson, then Director Stone, then Director Marsh. Director Nicholson.
It is a complicated issue, and and I think that, if we're really trying to recruit good candidates, then compensation is just one aspect of that. So I think that we need to be clear on what the purpose of this is, and maybe think about what other things play into this as part of this conversation. I actually really, I like that idea of tying it somehow to the community, and I'm good with it going up and down. I think that would be very healthy. And maybe it would mean people would work harder. I don't know. With some of the things that I find problematic about, I know we deal with really complicated stuff, and I know that if we had more skilled people, but you're drawing from, you don't want to preclude representing the general community. And so you don't want to be too elitist about it. And so I think, and the other thing that I find difficult is the community workload. So we all share the same amount of time doing the regular business decision stuff. But some people live in different areas that require a lot more work than others because of the number of people, or because of the way the community is laid out, or whatever. And I think some recognition of that needs to happen. And I also think apart from everything, you want to attract people that are committed to community work. And you do not want to set up a system where you're offering a good salary so it becomes someone's job and they're there forever. It's and you know as well as I do that once you're in office, most likely it is you'll be able to do a successful, at least for a while, a successful, and I just really think it's really healthy to have turnover. I don't think people who come into this and think it should be politics is a career are the best people for community work necessarily. I have to be careful here, but I think you get my gist. So I think that there's a lot of stuff in this discussion that we need to kind of tease out at some point in the process.
Thank you. I have Director Marsh and then Director Yanni DiNardo.
I think if I could wave my magic wand, if I had one, the way I would like to see this unfold would be that the province would take it on and have a citizens' assembly process, so that it brings along, we have the blessing of the province, and we have citizens who do go through it. And I know that would be costly, but I think, I understand what I'm hearing about people shouldn't make it a career, yet sometimes in some small communities, and maybe even large communities, there's a kind of rapport that is built between maybe the mayor or a particular councillor or a director, that the community just loves that person and the community thrives. And so unless we're going to get the download that you can only serve for a certain amount of time, like the President of the United States, I think that's a bit of a red herring here. I think that, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with us doing this, actually, because what do we compare it to? And, you know, I'm happy to have the conversation, but I think it would be kind of ironic if we decided to go to whatever. I mean, if the 75,000 is actually something that people really want to consider. You might lose, not because they didn't run, but some of the very best people in this valley, because we'll all get thrown out. You know, like, I mean, there's so many factors that I don't really think we should be needing to consider. And perhaps, and I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but it seems to me that it would be good to have a discussion at UBCM, and maybe UBCM, I don't think we're the only ones who are like stressed right out because of the opioid crisis and all the different things we're trying to do and build relationships to build housing and do all the networking. It seems to me that it would be a better process if it was kind of an across-the-board provincial process rather than, you know, I'd hate for us to get to the place that happened in Vancouver last year or 2 years ago, where they probably rightly, because how are you going to live in that city if you're, you know, a councillor full-time? And then they backed off. And I'm not confident that if there was a lot of pushback, people at this table wouldn't want to back off too, because for whatever reason they want to keep being able to be here, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if we have the time certainly to do that before June, but it seems to me if we really believe that across the board, our strength would be in our numbers and having citizens actually take a look at it. There might be an endorsement of it. Because I think, you know, the people that I know and that have got involved in North Cowichan and that have actually asked the question, how much do you make, are appalled. But there might be other people, and I think there are. I mean, some of our press were writing, well, why should Councillor so-and-so get paid to go over the CPRD? They had just a couple meetings a month. We already pay them as a councillor. You know, so there's all different range of viewpoint. And so if there was a proper process that was more universal and it had citizen involvement and then there was a report, you know, like not the level of the Bronwyn report, but the local government equivalent, then that could be quoted as this is the rationale for whatever the outcome might be. And I don't think we can do that alone. I think, you know, perhaps we'd want to talk to Selena Robinson and see if there's an appetite for the province. I mean, they're certainly aware. How many times do chairs and mayors meet them and call them about crises? Maybe we should do a little, maybe the chair should call Ms. Robinson and just see if she's getting other feelings. So that's just where I'm at right now.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo, and then Chair Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the 75,000 kind of struck me. I'm not, I've never felt in this job, so it's hard for me because this it's yucky, but I guess have been privileged that I didn't have to live on this income that I make here, but my other job did suffer from that, and I just don't, that's okay with me. But it's basically was the passion for my community and working with the community. And I always feel there's this fine line making this a career with 75,000 as opposed to, I think the very good electoral area directors have been the ones that are like super passionate about their community first, not so much about the compensation. I think that is, I don't know if that would be is of benefit myself. I don't know you're going to get the quality. And I think that's up to the community to decide who is the qualified person in their community, why we have elections. And I'm really nervous about how much, and putting a price on it makes me extremely uncomfortable. So I just wanted to make that noted.
Thank you. Chair Morrison?
Yeah, and I've been listening to what's being shared, and I relate back to what Ms. Mohan said, that, you know, there's processes that other groups have relied on. I've seen in most cases citizen committees and the likes being dismal failures from the addressing elected officials' compensation. I've spoken with the province around this issue, and they're quite frankly, it's it's your baby. I think that this part of the rationale for the establishment of this select committee was there was a desire to address this in the last board, and it got punted. And guess what? It's here, and it's for us to address or not. And I think that it's one of those difficult things to tackle, but I think it's to us to tackle. I don't see in the options in the report, in the methods that have been used before, an easy way or a formula or something that we can just plug into that's going to address this. I think we are going to have to be innovative and creative in our approach to this. Hopefully we can find something that will inspire the rest of the board to consider, and then come to a place where we either make a decision to make a recommendation for, I'm hoping for the next budget cycle, and that we can stand behind. I don't want to kick this down the road. I think that we have a challenge before us, and again, that's why this select committee was created. That we've looked at other things, and the other things haven't been attractive, and here we are. And I think this is the next most important thing to do as far as this committee's marching orders. It's always uncomfortable, but not all the jobs that we get here are comfortable jobs. So I want to encourage us to, I don't know how much more talking we need to do around this issue. I think we need to start looking at what approaches that we want to take. We've got a couple of months left in the life of this committee, and I think we should start to put pen to paper and start to come to a place where we can make a recommendation to the board. Thank you.
I have Director Stone and Director Marsh, and then I'll insert myself.
I just wanted to sort of clarify a couple things. I think the big pushback around Metro Van was actually about their giving themselves pensions. That's where, well, and that's what they rescinded after. But that was the big controversy at the time. I remember talking to Greg Moore a bit about it, and he said it was the pensions that really lit a fire, right? It's just, everybody thinks we have pensions, so why don't we have some? And in recognition, let's be real, the Metro Van is a whole different animal, right? I don't think you can equate it to anything. And, just going through a couple of things, nobody wants to touch this political football, and I think that even a citizens committee that we've had worked twice, same format 2 times. Basically, they actually changed their recommendations because when they made their recommendations with staff, their staff said they'll never touch this. It's too politically sensitive, and then they compromised on what they actually thought would be fair compensation because they knew that council would just kick it out because they couldn't deal with it politically, and it was leading into the last election. And then you do have, and I think this is to your point, Lori, I don't think anybody would get elected if it was that transparent that they were in it for the money. I always believe that the person who's the best community supporter and most effective communicator will probably get elected. But the challenge for me is that I know amazing people that when I approached them to run less, they said, I can't afford it. That was the answer. And I know I've got new councillors that can't believe the amount of time they're putting and that they get $1,000 a month. In the last 3 weeks, I think I've spent more than half of every single day with my council, at community events, at conferences, at strategic planning, at solid waste workshops. All of these different things happen, and they're saying I can't afford it, right? When I look at my own situation, I can't afford it either. Like in the last year, My staff is doing a great job, but the difference between us doing okay at my business and doing great is the fact that the main driver of revenue is no longer there. I spend 2 to 4 weeks, or 2 to 4 hours per week at my business, and I'm lucky to be able to spend 2 to 4 hours a week. Right now, I keep looking at my clock because I know that I have to go home and get my last period's overdue paperwork into my accountant, so that I can not pay too big of fines on it. You know, I actually thought, I was really proud of some work that we had done with senior staff, and me being a bit of a data geek, looking at compensation formulas and comparables and comparatives. It's much easier to do for municipalities because we have enough of them that are similar in enough ways that you can come up with some median and some averages and stuff that give people a base point. But we looked at things like financial or assets under administration, financial and non-financial assets, tax base mix, whether they're a regional hub and they have a lot of industrial, so their tax bases as well as population growth trends, all kinds of things, to come up with comparables that were kind of like a group of 10, 5 up and down, and then a group of 20, 10 up and 10 down, to give some perspective, and I think it worked really well. What it highlighted was local governments in general on Vancouver Island are usually underpaid relative to some of our siblings, if you will, around the province, other than Qualicum Beach. They have a 4-person council, though, so even though we're similar in size to Qualicum Beach, and our metrics in terms of growth and finances are actually surpassed them now. I think now the Qualicum Beach mayor is in the 50s or something like that, and I'm in the low 30s, right? So there's no question I wouldn't change what I do whether I get paid $34,000 a year or if I got paid $55,000 a year, but it sure would make it easier for somebody to come in behind me and be able to justify that level of investment, because I couldn't if I had a job. The only reason I can is because I own a business, right? What else do I have here? So compensation formula, I think that's good. And I think the government view on staff wages, even if the province would touch it, and I'm almost certain that they won't. Sorry, of course, this is the phone that I always keep in my bag. My apologies. Even if they would be willing to do it, I don't think I'd want them to. I don't know if you guys saw the response to the Strong Fiscal Futures Ernst & Young report that came out about senior staff salaries in local government, comparing them to deputy ministers, et cetera. And from what I can see, and I haven't spent a lot of time at the provincial government, I still think the senior staff at local government work harder, longer, and have more demands. Nobody expects your deputy minister to show up at 11:30 at night if there's an emergency in a community, but they sure do expect you to show up if you're the CAO, or if you're the planner or the Parks and Rec guy, whoever's on your sort of safety team. So I'd be hesitant, even if they would be willing to do it, to hand that over to the province. I always thought it would be nice if they could at least suggest a formula we could use that was a little more analytical, but then you're still going in the circle of comparisons, right? So. But I agree with Director Morrison, we need to get it done, even if it means that our big push from this is to go back to the compensation averages, come up with a good formula so that we can go through that process, and then trying to push on a discussion. Maybe it's even a workshop at AVICC and or UBCM, because I know, and I think we all know, there's not a lot of people in local government that go, wow, God, I get paid way too much, right? The common refrain is that it's a real struggle, and a lot of people quit this term, didn't run again, because you asked them and they said, I love the work, I couldn't afford to do it anymore. And those were the young people that were super talented. And sometimes, honestly, if somebody's great at community development, I'm okay if they make it a career. I don't think that's anybody's intent when they run for office. They see a problem they want to solve, and they want to make their communities better. And then when they get in there, and I'll refer to myself, I try and be humble. I'm always reflecting on getting better at this job, but I've never been so passionate and enjoyed something so much in my life and felt that my talents were well suited to it. And I'm fully intent on pursuing more politics in my life. And if I'm not in it, I want to work on community development and social enterprise or something, but I'm never going to let it go. So anyway, that's my third rant of the day.
Director Marsh?
I just wanted to clarify, when I said a citizens assembly, I didn't mean a committee. I meant, Or, yeah, and I mean, another option to consider would be, if the province indeed doesn't want to touch it, but the majority of UBCM members do, is there could be a process decided as the province through UBCM membership to choose a citizens' assembly, like similar idea to what was done when the city of Duncan and North Cowichan looked at amalgamation. So those people went, I can't remember how many months and how many hours, and they were educated by, well, all kinds of people about what municipalities and the city does, and they came up with a recommendation. And I just feel that, I do feel that it would be better if we did it as a group and did it to bring, because we're, you know, yeah, we love the valley and this is where we live, but we're all part of a province, and the issues that we're facing don't stop where the Cowichan Valley stops. The airshed doesn't stop at the top of the Malahat, and the watershed doesn't stop at the edge of the Salish Sea here. And we're being asked more and more to weigh in on those kinds of things. So I feel there might be an appetite, and what could potentially happen is each council and regional district would help to fund a percentage of that citizens' assembly. Because I think it's a lot more complex than we think. I don't think you can, there's very many places where you can compare apples to apples. So if you look at North Cowichan, when we were looking at our compensation last year, we were compared to Campbell River, which I believe has about the same population, but geographically they're way smaller. So in North Cowichan, we have several towns, like Crofton considers themselves their own town, Chemainus considers themselves their own town, whereas Campbell River has Campbell River, right? So that's not an apples to apple comparison. And so I just feel if we're going to be taken seriously as going in the future, it would be best to do it as a group. I'm not sensing that others feel that way, but I just have to say that again, just to clarify that a committee that we just pick is a lot different than a citizen assembly process, which people, I think it's kind of like a survey. Maybe Ms. Solder knows more about it because you were probably involved, right? Could you tell a little bit about how that works?
Ms. Salder?
Thank you. So for the Citizens Assembly process in the North Cowichan Duncan circumstance, it was actually quite an involved process, but citizens were chosen at random and they volunteered their times, so it was all voluntary. They were not compensated in any way for participation, and they met over quite a number of months and gave up whole Saturdays to be educated on the workings of the local government and how the two local governments worked and how they interacted with each other. And we also hired a consultant to come in and lead the process, and so that it was very arm's length from the councils. And then the committees, the Citizens Assembly also had public meetings where they went out and shared their thoughts and got thoughts from the public in general, and then came back together. Even in that small circumstance, it was a fairly expensive process.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
And I imagine on a provincial level, you would likely need to compensate people because there would be a lot of travel if you would need representation from around the province, so it would be quite a bit more costly.
Mm-hmm.
But that process did, the recommendations from the committee were received well, I think, but
No,
yeah.
they recommended amalgamation.
They recommended amalgamation.
Oh, they were in North Cowichan, but it had to be a majority in both.
It
and
had to be
wasn't
a
in
majority
Duncan.
in both, yes.
They were very well received in North Cowichan.
I have Director Yanni DiNardo, and then I'll insert myself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had to let you know that I'm leaving in a few minutes. So if I exit stage left, you know that I had another appointment. I thought that this would end, would have been shorter. Just on Director Stone's comment on the talented friends that would have stayed if they could afford it. But I look at it as just with my children, so my daughter who's a high school teacher, is she going to leave 4 years of high school to come to local government? You'd lose your pension. Like there's, you know, that's just really an awkward, that's awkward that way too. So I'm not sure what the solution is, and I realize that we have to be valued, but you know, those comparisons didn't really work for me. Thanks.
Okay, I know everybody wants to go, but I guess we won't be wrapping this up today. But we often want to be leaders here. I think this is an opportunity for us. And yeah, this is a political thing and a conversation that I like your political football analogy that no one wants to touch. But I think it could be compared to skill set, to other jobs that require the same amount of skill set and the same amount of stress, and because there's an added stress to it, and there's also an expectation of being available. You're never off. But we could also look at compensation in other ways, such as education compensation for going to university or master's degrees or other forms of compensation, or childcare. Were also discussed so that we could attract, young moms and I totally agree with the fact that there's lots of skilled people who just can't take it and they're community oriented as well. But, so I guess we don't really have our recommendations, a motion to, we have Mr. Kieber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thinking is, it sounds to me like you want to carry this further, but it's not something that I think staff should be actually driving. So if this is something you want to go, I suggest that you have your staff hire a consultant to bring them in to do this type of work, whether it is a comparator or whatever parameters you want to use to determine that, but have that led by a consultant. So I recommend you make some type of motion along the
We need a
lines.
motion, or like a workshop, or I would picture a workshop at first, just so we could have a clear idea that we're all talking about the same thing.
Madam Chair, I would say a workshop, if you're just talking for this committee, because the board has asked this committee to come back with recommendations. And you don't have a lot of time. So what Mr. Kieber suggested, perhaps that's what you should do. Pass a motion to engage a consultant to assist you with this process.
Would we pay for it?
Actually, Talitha here, right next to me, goes budget. There is, in general government, there's strategic initiatives funding in there that hasn't been touched at this point. We also, HR is going to be doing similar work for exempt management during this coming year as well. I'm not sure if you can combine the two with the same consultant to see some kind of efficiencies there. But at this point, it's we just need the direction, and then we'll find depends on the cost and where we can find the funding.
Chair Morrison.
So would something along the lines, something relatively general in nature, such as committee recommends that staff explore the engagement of a consultant to assist committee in this exercise, would
Discussion.
that work?
Is that
Madam Chair,
detailed enough?
That's a little bit too vague, because it says explore. It's actually to engage a consultant to help with this process.
Yeah, that's what I said, didn't I?
Mr. Barry, are you okay with that motion?
Sure.
What did I say?
Engage a consultant to assist with this process.
That's what I said.
We'll tweak
I'll
that
move that.
just slightly. We'll have compensation.
Do
et
I have
cetera.
a seconder? It's been second.
I'd like to
A-
have
a discussion?
the motion sound a little bit more professional than this process.
He's,
Which we would do if it was done in writing, and you've heard me say this many
yeah,
times.
yeah.
Yeah, I
This will
mean,
be
I think,
tweaked.
you know,
This will,
It's gonna go to the board as a cleaned up.
Hey,
motion.
order here, hey.
Thank you.
because the board would have to approve it anyway, so we will work on the wording for that.
Okay,
And that'll be not going to this board, it'll be going to the May 8th meeting.
okay. Director Nicholson has a question.
Well, I just would like to make this not just about compensation. I think we should keep the goal in mind of attracting quality candidates. And I would really think it would be important to understand how we can improve overall, how we can do that. Compensation is just one factor.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's the conversation completely. Mr. Kieber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, that changes the whole direction of what the consultant, that'd be a different consultant altogether and different type of work. So I'm not saying you shouldn't look down that road, but don't think it should be tied with the compensation consultant.
I feel like that's the outcome. Could produce that kind of outcome, just like other outcomes. Not the only one, but Director Nicholson.
So I am not prepared to go out to the community and have a conversation about this if it's just about money. Because I think that what we're trying to do is attract better, good quality candidates into these kind of positions. And compensation is an important determinant for sure, but it's not the only one. And so I think that we have to do our work on all fronts if we're going to be able to have a conversation with the community that will be effective.
Director Stone and then Director Santee.
I just, for the purpose of this discussion, the agenda item says compensation consideration. So I think that's an important thing, but that should be another item that we discuss, is how to reach out and cultivate and attract new candidates. Compensation would be part of that discussion, but I think what we're talking about more is like a skills development, workshops, communicating with our citizens and stuff. So those are two separate items from my perspective.
Director Santee.
Just going to the community and having a description of what we're thinking a candidate to fill a position is, what the criteria is. If I went to the community in an open house and said, this is what we want to see in the next election, this is criteria for, a councillor and for a mayor. And I think people would resent that I'm saying to them, we have a job description. We have a job description, but I don't have a personality description. So to me, I look at people that are running, they're engaged in their community ahead of time for years and years as volunteers. And you come into elections, this is just me personally. I came as a school trustee in 1999, and it wasn't about money, it was just how can I better serve my community in education? And then it kind of expanded, but to say that there's kind of descriptions about what a person should be in running for a position, I just think that we're crossing the line, and I'm not comfortable with that.
I have Chair Morrison and then Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm gonna have to dash here, but this committee is about, we've already tackled benefits, we are tackling compensation now, and it was never intended that the scope of this be directed to creating the environment or the list for, that was never the intent of what this committee, and if the board wants to talk about child minding as a benefit and those sorts of things, absolutely, but that was never the intent of what this select committee was tasked to do. It was about benefits, it was about compensation, and I think those are outside the purview of what this was intended to do.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do you have a comment to the motion, Director Nicholson?
Well, I just want to be clear that, I'm not saying that we should be telling people what they need, who needs to be the people that we're trying to elect it. But I don't think that you can separate, it's too self-serving if you're just talking about compensation. It just really is too self-serving. And I would be more interested in, being able to go out to the community and talk to them about what kind of things would make it easier for them to, park their careers and serve, and compensation may be one factor. But we don't even have that kind of information. And
I think it's pretty subjective, though.
it certainly is subjective, but,
Sorry.
if you don't have a broad conversation, it's self-serving, I think.
I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? Director Nicholson,
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Do I have a motion? First and second, all in favor? Thank you. Don't people expect this meeting to be like a working group? Oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?